Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and today we're going to take a look at red in Magic Origins. We've already done white, blue, and black. We've only got two left, and then the little mini show on Wednesday, of course, with golden artifacts and whatnot. I'm not going to go over the main disclaimers as I have in the past 3 videos. If you need to know those disclaimers, go check those out first. The big disclaimer is just simply this is a limited set review for Draft and Sealed only, not talking about Constructed. But let's jump right on in with the first card, Abbot of Carol Keep. This is a 1 and a red creature, human monk at rare, and it's a 2/1. It says prowess, and then it also says when Abbot of Carol Keep enters the battlefield, exile the top card of your library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. Not a super big fan of this. Since red kind of got this card advantage ability, maybe 4 or 5 sets ago, I think they kind of settled on this being red card advantage. I've been really unimpressed by it. I've been impressed by it on the Chandra in M15, I think, maybe in M14 as well, that had this as a repeatable ability for 0, I think. That was pretty good, because there was no cost to get that card advantage other than playing that Planeswalker, but every turn after that, it was free if you wanted to do that. Every other time that we've seen this ability, there's been a cost associated with it, and paying mana to get this ability is really dangerous, because you may just not have the mana left to actually cast the spell that you turned up. So Abbot of Carol Keep, if I play this on turn 2, the card's wasted. The card that I take off the top is just wasted. I just ripped it up. If I play this on turn 6, I can probably play the card that was turned face up, but I just played a 2/1 on turn 6. That seems really, really, really bad too. Maybe this has a place in Limited where, you know, on turn 3 or turn 4 in a really super aggressive deck, this is what you would expect, this is what you would want, because the card that you're going to flip up is going to be a 1 or 2 drop probably. But in Limited, I'm just not a big fan of this one. I'll give it a C+. It's a decent aggressive creature with the prowess on it, but nothing higher than that, I think. Next up, we have Acolyte of the Inferno. Acolyte of the Inferno is a 2 and a red creature human monk at uncommon for a 3/1. It has Renown 1, and it says whenever Acolyte of the Inferno becomes blocked by a creature, it deals 2 damage to that creature. I really like the design of this card. It's not quite as reliable as flying, for example, for making sure that you trigger Renown, that you get your guy Renown, but it is still pretty common that I think this guy's going to get Renowned, especially in the early game, because he just stomps through X2s. If he gets blocked by an X2, it's just dead and he lives. He doesn't get Renowned that turn, but you just took down an X2 for very low cost, and you still have a 3/1 sitting around. Your opponent can't block this guy until they have an X3, which means, you know, any stumble from your opponent, or even just your opponent playing on curve, may mean that this guy gets through and becomes a 4/2. Seems pretty solid to me, especially in an aggressive deck, and I'm going to start out a little bit high on this guy and give him a B-. Next up, we have Act of Treason. Act of Treason is a 2 and a red sorcery at common, and it's a very common reprint. It's in most core sets, really. It says, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. These are known as threaten effects. The most famous card that did this was Threaten. And, I hate this card. I hate this effect. I never really want these in my deck. I never really feel okay playing them. I play them as maybe a 23rd card, or maybe if I have a lot of sack outlets. And so I don't really play these, but my opponents will play them and I'll get just blown out, because it's a card that you can't play around. You know, do you really not play your 6/6 flyer just because you're playing a red opponent? You know, that would be a terrible play to keep that back. But then you play that, and then they take it, and then they hit you with it. I don't think they're necessarily making the right play. It's just one of those cards that get you, but probably shouldn't have been played. Yeah, I'm sticking with my grade of C on this card. I don't really ever want to play this. I'll play it if I need to. Your mileage may vary. You know, I know a lot of people really like this effect, and if you're one of them, you can go C+ on this, but I'm going to go with C. Next up, we have a Crowan Sergeant. This is a 2 and a red creature human soldier at common for a 2/2. So it's overcosted. But what's it do? Well, it has First Strike and it has Renown 1. Yeah, this I like. You know, as I was talking about with Renown so far in all my set reviews, I don't like it on a vanilla creature, but I like it if there's some way of slightly more likely guaranteeing me that I'm going to get Renown. And First Strike's a way to do that. You know, this can't be blocked, just like Acolyte of the Inferno? Acolyte of the Inferno? Yeah, Acolyte of the Inferno. Just like him, this guy can't be blocked profitably until your opponent has an X3, and even then, you know, could have combat tricks in red especially. But the First Strike, I think, really helps this guy potentially get through. At 3, this means you're not attacking until turn 4, so this guy seems a little bit less likely to get through, I think. Although maybe still. He just will. Yeah, you know, I like the First Strike on it. I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting this is an amazing card. It's still an overcosted 2/2, and if you, well, not an overcosted because it does have First Strike. It's a decently costed 2/2. But if it becomes a 3/3 First Strike for 3, then you've got yourself a good card. So I think I'll go with C+ on this one. I need to see how it plays out. I think it'll be less cuttable than cuttable, but it could be a C. We'll have to see with this one, but I'll go with C+. Next up, we have Avaricious Dragon. This is a 2 red creature dragon at Mythic for a 4/4 flyer. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an additional card. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. Yeah, this is a 4/4 flyer for 4, which is already pretty darn solid. You get a double draw step every turn. Totally awesome. You have to discard your hand, whatever, cast those cards that you want and get rid of the ones that you don't. This seems pretty darn good to me. You probably want this slightly late. I don't know that it's a turn 4 play unless you've already really significantly emptied your hand. Maybe it's more of a turn 5 play, but a 4/4 flyer at any point in the game is pretty solid to me. This guy just seems like a solid A to me. Next up, we have Bellows Lizard. This is a single red 1/1 creature lizard at common, and it's a reprint as well. It's been in a lot of core sets. It says 1 and a red, Bellows Lizard gets +1/+0 until end of turn. I've never liked this guy before. He's a 1/1 for 1, and he has expensive fire breathing for some reason. Normally for fire breathing, you pay 1 red to give it +1/+0, not 1 and a red. So this guy's just overcosted and ultimately just awful. I'm never looking to play this card intentionally. I give it just a solid F. Next up, we have Boggart Brute. This is a 2 and a red creature goblin warrior at common with 3/2, and it has menace, meaning that it can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. Yeah, a 3/2 for 3 that can't be blocked by 2 or more creatures just seems totally fine by me. Not bomby, not amazing, not a super high pick, but a totally fine pickup, and less cuttable than cuttable, so C+ for me. Next up, we have Call of the Full Moon. This is a 1 and a red enchantment aura at uncommon, and it says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+2 and has trample. At the beginning of each upkeep, if a player cast 2 or more spells last turn, sacrifice Call of the Full Moon. I really don't know about this card. Would I play this as +3/+2 for 2? Maybe? That is a decent boost for 2. It has the aura problem of being 2 for 1, of course, but +3/+2 for 2 is a decent boost. And the addition of trample is pretty nice. If this is on a 3/3, you know, you've got a 6/5 trample, which is pretty nice. Allowing your opponents to drop a couple of quick spells, you know, on turn 4, they could drop 2/2 drops and this enchantment is destroyed. That kind of hurts. They don't even have to kill your creature to get rid of the enchantment, but I don't know. This seems like an aura that I might actually give a chance to, at least until I get proven wrong. So I think I'm going to go with a C on it. It could be higher. It could be lower. I really have to play with this one, I think. So C for me. All right, next up, it's Planeswalker time. We've got on the first side, Baby Chandra, Chandra Fire of Kaladesh. She's a 1 red legendary creature, human shaman at Mythic for a 2/2. Whenever you cast a red spell on tap, Chandra Fire of Kaladesh. Tap Chandra Fire of Kaladesh deals, tap, Chandra, Fighter of Kaladesh, deals 1 damage to target player. If Chandra has dealt 3 or more damage this turn, exile her, then return her to the battlefield transformed under her owner's control. So we've got a 2/2 pinger for 3, which is okay. It doesn't hit creatures, which hurts a little bit. Pingers are awesome when they hit creatures. Just hitting players hurts a little bit. So to flip her, you're going to need to cast probably 2 spells in a turn. So you're going to need to hit with her, cast a spell, on tap, hit with her, cast a spell, on tap, hit with her. Or, much more likely, attack with her, deal 2 damage, hope that she lives, then cast a spell on tap and ping. That's the more likely way I see of her flipping. I'm really curious to see how often this is possible. You know, I feel like people are going to very readily be looking to kill Chandra. So you're going to need your opponent to not have a 2/2 or a 2/1 on turn 4, which is when you can attack with her. And that seems a little bit optimistic to me. So I'm really curious how often you're going to be able to flip her. I do think she's fine, though, on that side. I think a 2/2 pinger for 3 is fine. But when she does flip, she becomes Chandra Roaring Flame, a Planeswalker Chandra Ep Mythic that starts with 4 loyalty. Her +1 ability says Chandra Roaring Flame deals 2 damage to target player. Awesome. You know, I'll totally take basically free damage to my opponent every turn. It's too bad it can't hit creatures to help her protect herself, but it's a decent +1. But the -2 is Chandra Roaring Flame deals 2 damage to target creature. So there we go. There's the creature damage. Shock on a stick. Always good. She can do it at least twice if you flip her and then just -2 and then next turn -2. Probably wouldn't recommend that, but those 2 abilities seem awesome. You basically are just slinging damage left and right to creatures, to players, to whatever you want with her. And she has an ultimate, of course, -7. Chandra Roaring Flame deals 6 damage to each opponent. Each player dealt damage this way gets an emblem with, at the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 3 damage to you. That's really cool. I really like that you're basically setting your opponent on fire and they're burning for the next several turns until they die. I think that's really cool and really flavorful. It's a really nice ultimate as well. It's one that I'd actually actively work towards. 6 damage might just close out the game, and if it doesn't, your opponent's on a pretty darn short clock. Yeah, overall, I really like the flip side of Chandra. I think she's really good. She doesn't do anything fancy. She just does things really, really efficiently and effectively. It's her human side, or, well, she's still human. It's her pre-spark side that I'm a little bit more worried about because she is very vulnerable, and I really am unsure as to how readily you're going to be able to flip her. If you flip her, I think she's just incredibly good and limited. So I'm going to go with an A- here. I think she's awesome overall. I'm just a little bit hesitant on how easy it is going to be to flip her. But if you flip her, boy, your opponent had better watch out. Next up, we have Chandra's Fury. Chandra's Fury is a 4 and a red instant at common. And it says Chandra's Fury deals 4 damage to target player and 1 damage to each creature that player controls. 4 damage to the face isn't that awesome. At instant speed, it's a little bit better, but unless it's ending the game, that's not that awesome. Pinging the team probably won't do much most of the time. Ultimately, this just isn't a premium burn card, and I think it's one that I'll cut pretty readily. I give it a C. I just don't want to play spells that primarily are just damaging my opponent, so C for me. Next up, we have Chandra's Ignition. This is a 3 red sorcery at rare, and it says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. Now this I really like. I need a single creature, even like a 3/3, to potentially wipe their team, plus ping them for some amount of damage. And also my team, note that it does say to each other creature. So it's going to hit your team as well. Be careful. But this is a very cool red style sweeper, and I really like it. Not only that, but it's a way to actually ignite Chandra's Spark, because you could have her deal 2 damage to everything, and then tap her, ping, and flip her. I think that's really cool and flavorful, and I just really like this card. I think it's a pretty high pick for me. It requires some setup, but it's really minimal setup. The setups basically have a creature. So A- for me. I really like this card. Next up, we have Cobble Brute. This is a 3 and a red creature elemental at common for a 5/2 with no text, just flavor text. Cobble Brute was really unimpressive last time around. It was in, I want to say Return to Ravnica. Maybe it was Gatecrash, but no, I think it was Return to Ravnica. But it was really unimpressive. You know, I don't want to pay 4 mana for an X2, even if it is a 5/2. If it had Trample, maybe. If it had First Strike, maybe. If it had Flying, absolutely. But for no rules text, I don't like this. Everything ever blocks it and kills it. So skip this guy unless you really desperately need a creature. So I'm going to go with like a D on this guy. Next up, we have Demolish. This is a 3 and a red sorcery at common, and it says destroy target artifact or land. I don't see enough artifacts that are super playable outside of the artifact deck, which just wants them all. Plus, of those that are playable, none of them seem to be super threatening enough to really warrant putting this card in your deck or taking it very highly. I think it would serve much better to just have this card in your deck be a threat, be a creature, be a burn spell, be anything, really. Still sideboard if you need it, but this is a card that you're going to take because there's just literally nothing else in the pack for you, and you're probably not going to cast it all that readily. As well, it's sorcery. That hurts it even more. It's 4 mana. Yeah, it hits a land, but you're not going to blow up lands. There's no point in playing this just to get rid of lands. So, solid D for me. Maybe even D-. Next up, we have Dragon Fodder. This is a 1 and a red sorcery at common, and it says put 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. We just had this in Dragons of Tarkir, and it's been very, very, very mediocre there. This is not that card that I can't think of the name of right now. The white one that makes 2 1/1s, but at instant speed. Rally the something, or whatever it's called. Yeah, this not being instant really, really, really hurts it. Getting 2 1/1 goblins on turn 2 on your turn, just not that good, and late in the game is just awful, so I'm going to give this like a C-. You can play it if you desperately need creatures, but even then I don't think you should. Next up, we have Embermaw Hellion. Embermaw Hellion is a 3 red creature Hellion at rare for a 4/5. It has Trample, and it says if another red source you control, so that means permanent or spell, would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. That's pretty cool. A 4/5 Trample for 5 is fine by me. It's totally okay. The fact that it sort of gives an anthem to your team is kind of cool. So all of your creatures basically have +1/+0, which I think is pretty nifty. Not literally they don't, but in most combat situations they will. Plus it makes your burn spells just a single little bit better. Just seems like a totally fine card to me. I think it's going to, unless it's dealt with really fast, really rack up the extra incidental damage. And so I think this guy's really good. I'm going to be pretty high on him and actually give him an A-. Next up, we have Enthralling Victor. This is a 3 and a red creature human warrior at uncommon for a 3/2. It says, when Enthralling Victor enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature an opponent controls with power 2 or less until end of turn. On tap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. So you get to active Treason something when this guy enters the battlefield. So my big question is, what on earth am I going to do with a 2/2 on turn 4 or later when this guy actually comes down? A 2/2 is not going to do much good for me. I'm going to take it and I'm going to swing with it, and I guess probably get in for 2 damage because my opponent's probably not going to want to kill their 2/2, and then it just goes back to their side of the board. And I've got a 3/2 on my side, so that's cool, but you know, it's just not that awesome. It's fine because you do have a 3/2. You know, this is active Treason, and for 1 extra mana, you get a 3/2 left behind. That's fine. That's totally fine by me. Although it's not active Treason because you can only get a tiny guy. So, you know, I think this is a C. You know, I don't want to sound like I'm super down on this card. You are going to get potentially just an incidental 2 damage off of him, but I don't think he's super awesome. So I think he's cuttable if you want to, and not cuttable if you don't. The ability just doesn't do much for me. Next up, we have Exquisite Firecraft, which has really cool art. It's a 1 red sorcery at rare, and it says Exquisite Firecraft deals 4 damage to target creature or player. Spell Mastery: if there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, Exquisite Firecraft can't be countered by spells or abilities. Bathe in Dragonfire was pretty solid in Dragons of Tarkir, or Fate Reforged, I think it was in. It was an easy pick, relatively high, and it was hampered only by being a sorcery. This is the exact same card, except it's harder to cast because it's 1 red instead of 2 in a red. But it should still be decent. Plus it can hit players, which Bathe in Dragonfire could not. So that does give it a little bit of a boost, and arguably the 1 red is a reasonable price increase, or price side increase, I guess. The Spell Mastery is flavor text in limited. Nobody is really going to be countering this. You know, once every like 50 games this could be relevant, but probably won't be the vast majority of the time. But yeah, this just seems like a solid burn spell to me, a solid removal spell. Kind of sucks that it's not sorcery, but it'll still do its job most of the time, so I give it a solid B. Next up, we have Fiery Conclusion. This is a 1 and a red instant at uncommon, and it says, as an additional cost to cast Fiery Conclusion, sacrifice a creature. Fiery Conclusion deals 5 damage to target creature. So you've got to sack a creature to deal 5 damage. So this is more than collateral damage. Collateral damage was the same card, except it dealt 3 damage. This deals 5, and collateral damage was a little bit borderline playable. This I think is slightly better because it does deal 5 damage, which is nice. Doesn't deal it to a player, but oh well. Obviously very good with Active Treason, with Enthralling Victor, anything that can allow you to take control of an opponent's creature and sack it for some extra damage. Yeah, you know, this seems fine to me. Sacking a creature is a definite cost, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to go with like a C on this. I think it's probably in the wheelhouse of collateral damage, just a little bit more playable. Next up, we have Fiery Impulse. This is a single red instant at common, and it says Fiery Impulse deals 2 damage to target creature. So it's shock that doesn't hit players. But it has Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, Fiery Impulse deals 3 damage to that creature instead. So it's Lightning Bolt that doesn't hit players. This seems fun. This seems awesome. It can't hit players, so that's a slight miss. You know, you don't want to hit players with this on turn 3, but it's really nice to have a spell that deals 3 damage to players, you know, on turn 9 when they're at 3, or when they're at low enough that you can attack plus this. So that's a slight miss, but it's only a tiny one. Shock is great. Lightning Bolt's awesome. Take these pretty highly, I would say. B+ for me. If you can get a few of these, then they can just fuel Spell Mastery themselves, which I think is awesome. So solid B+ for me. Next up, we have Fire Fiend Elemental. This is a 3 and a red creature elemental at common. It has haste, and it has Renown 1, and it's a 3/2, by the way. So yeah, we've talked about Renowned. We've talked about how I really want a way for me on the creature itself to preferably guarantee, or at least up the chances that I'll get Renown. And this is a way. Haste is great. I think one of the ways you're going to get Renown is with a really opportunistic attack. Your opponent is going to attack, and you're going to have a Renown creature or something like that. Having a hasty Renown creature is awesome because your opponent can attack, not knowing that you're going to attack with a Renown creature next turn. So on turn 4, you drop this guy into a tapped out board on your opponent's side, swing in, and he becomes a 4/3. A 3/2 for 4 is a little bit overcosted. A 4/3 for 4 is pretty fine. Fairly common cost, actually, for a 4/3. It doesn't seem super awesome. It just seems like a decent, easily renownable card. So I'm going to go with a C+ on it. I think it's slightly less cuttable than cuttable. Next up, we have Flameshadow Conjuring. This is a 3 and a red enchantment at rare that says, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay red. If you do, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. This seems really, really fun to me. It can super abuse enter the battlefield effects or leave the battlefield effects because it's going to enter and leave on the same turn. This card doesn't do much of anything in a board stall, unfortunately. You know, if we're stalled out, we've got 5 creatures on each side, and I make a copy of my 3/3. Odds are a 3/3 won't be able to attack profitably into their board, but I'll still do it because what else is that token going to do? I still feel like this card and its ability does represent a pretty significant amount of extra damage over the course of a game, especially if you can abuse enter the battlefield effects with this. I think I like this. It could also be just too cute of a card, but I'm going to start out very optimistically with an A-. I'll take this first pick if I see it, and then just really, really harp on enter the battlefield effects. Next up, we have Girapur. Girapur? Yeah, let's go with Girapur. Aether Grid. This is a 2 and a red enchantment at uncommon that says tap 2 untapped artifacts you control. Girapur Aether Grid deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This really depends on how viable heavy artifact decks are. The 1 damage doesn't seem like much beyond a way to ping your opponent, which is inevitability. You know, Archer's Parapet was fine in Concept Tarkir Limited. Now, it was also an 0/5 wall, whereas this is just an enchantment that doesn't do anything. I feel like you'd really want to tap 4 to deal 2 much more regularly, and I'm curious about how often you could actually do that. Still, dedicating a card slot to this card seems a little bit risky, since I worry that it might just be a dead card a lot of the time. You know, this isn't Mirrodin. There's an artifact sub-theme here for sure, but this is not Mirrodin. So I'm going to be cautious on this card, and I'm going to go with a C-. It could turn out to be decent in the artifact deck, but we'll have to see. Next up, we have Girapur Gearcrafter. This is a 2 and a red creature human artificer at common for a 2/1, and it says when Girapur Gearcrafter enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So this is a 3/2 for 3, spread across 2 bodies, one of them flying. So that seems fine to me. This is not spectacular at all. It's just a totally normally costed creature. Obviously gets better in the Thopter / artifact deck, but otherwise is just a solid C. Next up, we have Goblin Glory Chaser. This is a single red creature goblin warrior at uncommon for a 1/1. And it says Renown 1. As long as Goblin Glory Chaser is renowned, it has Menace. I think this guy could be okay in an aggressive deck, but not much use anywhere else. You basically need to play this guy turn 1, attack turn 2, get him renowned, and then you've hopefully got a 2/2 unblockable for a few turns at least. Then he becomes solid. Then he's going to do a lot of damage. Late game, unfortunately, this card's a dead card. You know, drawing a 1/1 for 1 on turn 7 is just the worst thing you could ever do. So, because he is so good on turn 1, I will go with a C+ on him, but I feel like he could drop significantly lower, because at the end of the day, he is a 1/1 for 1, and you don't play 1/1s for 1 unless they're super impactful. This guy at least is, if you get him early enough. So C+ could be optimistic, but I'll go with it for now. Next up, we have Goblin Piledriver. This is a famous popular card, and it's back. It's 1 and a red creature goblin warrior at rare. It is a 1/2. It has protection from blue. And it says, whenever Goblin Piledriver attacks, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking goblin. Goblin Tribal really doesn't seem like a thing in this set. There's only 4 or 5, and most of them are just kind of maybe playable. So I don't really want to take this and then put in a whole bunch of mediocre goblins just to fuel this one single card. This card was printed in order to get it into Modern. This was not printed for Limited. This was not printed to enable Goblin Tribal in Draft or Sealed or anything. And interestingly, the protection from blue aspect really hammers home that point, because Wizards has said that they're phasing out protection. They're going to do it very rarely because it's confusing, it's hard for new players to understand, etc. So the fact that we have a card with protection on it really strongly suggests to me that it's a reprint for the sake of reprinting. That being said, you're never not first picking this because it's such a valuable card. Realistically, this is like a C-. At F&M, where you're drafting for value a lot of the time, it's an A+. You're going to take it first pick, of course. Next up, we have Infectious Bloodlust. This is a 1 and a red enchantment aura at common, and it says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+1, has haste, and attacks each turn if able. When enchanted creature dies, you may search your library for a card named Infectious Bloodlust. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. If this gave Menace or something, I could see it being decent. If this gave Trample, maybe. But giving Haste, I'm not super excited by it. It does replace itself with another copy if you lose it, which is nice. That gets around the 2-for-1 problem of auras. But in order to replace itself, that means you have to have used 2 card slots on this spell. So I'm really hesitant on this card, as I am on most auras usually. I just don't think there's enough value here to justify it, so I'm going to go with a C-. Next up, we have Lightning Javelin. This is a 3 and a red sorcery at common, and it says Lightning Javelin deals 3 damage to target creature or player, scry 1. So Bolt of Keranos in Born of the Gods was totally playable, and it was 1 red, deal 3 damage, and scry 1. So this is the same card, except you have to pay 1 extra, but it's a single red as opposed to a double red. So it's slightly more expensive, it's slightly easier to cast, the sorcery speed hurts it, the scry helps it. Ultimately, it's pretty hard to turn down a lightning bolt. You have to really, really weaken a lightning bolt. You have to make it expensive and make it sorcery speed and do a lot to it to make it unplayable. And that hasn't been done here yet. 4 mana for a lightning bolt at sorcery speed plus scry 1. I'll take it. I'll totally take it. B-, it's not, 100% premium removal because it is not an instant, but I'll go with B- on it. Next up, we have Mage Ring Bully. This is a 1 and a red creature human warrior at common. It's a 2/2, it has prowess, and Mage Ring Bully attacks each turn if able. 2/2s for 2 are fine, but one that attacks every single turn I'm a little bit less certain about. You're going to need to have an awful lot of spells to back this guy up with prowess, and of course that's not the best of ideas in Limited. Ultimately, I think this will be kind of on the level of Smoldering Efreet. It's a playable 2/2 for 2 if you need that, and if you're in a super aggressive deck, but otherwise he's really not that good and becomes pretty bad actually in the late game, so I'm going to go with a solid C on him. Next up, we have Magmatic Insight. This is a single red sorcery at uncommon that says, as an additional cost to cast Magmatic Insight, discard a land card. Draw 2 cards. So this seems a little bit more designed for Constructed, I think, where we have decks that want, maybe 4 lands on the battlefield and then any extras are useless. It's rare to have such a cohesive, low-curve deck in Draft and ever in Sealed. So ultimately, I think this is kind of a low C-. But still, it is decent in most decks late in the game when you're starting to really flood out. But it's not as powerful as it could be in Constructed in something like Boss Sly. So I think I'll go with probably like a C- on this, maybe a C, but definitely lower than it would ever be in Constructed. Next up, we have Molten Vortex. This is a single red enchantment at rare, and it says pay a red, discard a land card. Molten Vortex deals 2 damage to target creature or player. C above. Everything I said about Magmatic Insight is the same thing here for Molten Vortex. Significantly better in Constructed than in Limited. In Limited, you want your 5th, 6th land usually. 7th, 8th, 9th, at that point, maybe you don't want the lands as much. But shocking per land discard does seem a fair bit better. You can pick off creatures, you can ping your opponent. There's just a lot you can do with this. I think this could maybe be a B- in Limited, but that does require a bit of a lower curve deck. You want to top out at 4-ish, I think, maybe 5-ish. A deck that's fine with tossing lands in the graveyard left and right, but I think it's okay. I think it's fairly decent. B-, significantly better in Constructed, of course. Next up, we have Pia and Kieran Nalar, Chandra's parents, I believe. 2 red for legendary creature human artificer at rare for a 2/2. And it says, when Pia and Kieran Nalar enters the battlefield, and I hate that grammar because, of course, this is 2 people, but the card and the creature is one thing. Anyways, when they enter the battlefield, put 2 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. Pay 2 and a red, sack an artifact. Pia and Kieran Nalar deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Yeah, Chandra's parents look really good. Really, really, really good. Getting a 4/4 for 4 is cool. A 4/4 where 2/2 is in the air is really cool. As well, you don't have to just sacrifice one of those Thopters to do the shock. It can be any artifact to do the shock, meaning that those slightly less playable artifacts that we'll talk about on Wednesday becomes more playable just because you can blow them up to shock somebody or shock a creature. I think you first pick this every time and you heavily force artifacts. I really, really, really want to play with these. Seems really fun. Solid A for me. Next up we have Pricklebar. This is a 4 and a red creature boar at common for a 3/3. However, as long as it's your turn, Pricklebar gets +2/+0 and has first strike. 5/3 first strike on your turn seems pretty awesome for 5 mana. A 3/3 on your opponent's turn for 5 mana seems horrible. Just horrible. So, you know, this really wants to be in an aggressive deck, I think, where you're attacking with it and not blocking with it. But aggressive decks really aren't in the market for 5-drops. So, you know, at the very least, this does seem decent enough in the late game for an aggressive deck, but it's just ultimately not what an aggressive deck wants. So, you know, I just think it's too much. 5-drops have to be super awesome for me to want to play them, and this is only super awesome like half the time, and even then it's arguable if it's super awesome or just awesome. So I'm going to go with a C on it, maybe even a C-. Next up, we have Ravaging Blaze. This is an X red instant at uncommon, and it says Ravaging Blaze deals X damage to target creature. Spell Mastery. If there are 2 or more instant and/or sorcery cards in your graveyard, Ravaging Blaze also deals X damage to that creature's controller. So, you know, this loses a couple points for not being able to finish off your opponent, but if you have Spell Mastery, it can finish off your opponent. Yeah, again, Spell Mastery, I'm really curious how frequently it'll be turned on. But this is just a solid removal spell regardless. X red burn spells are almost always really, really, really awesome. Because if I need to kill a 1/1, I can kill a 1/1. If I need to kill a 6/6, I can kill a 6/6. I can do whatever I want with this spell, and that versatility is just really hard to come by a lot of the time. So solid B+ for me. Potentially even in A- range, but let's go with a B+. Next up is Scab Clan Berserker. She's a 1 red creature human berserker at rare for a 2/2. She has haste, renown 1, and whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, if Scab Clan Berserker is renowned, Scab Clan Berserker deals 2 damage to that player. Haste and renowned, as I talked about, seems pretty cool. It seems like it's going to help you get renowned easily. Seems likely to happen, so that's decent. So generally, this is a 3/3 for 3. The ability seems more relevant in Constructed, however, where there are more non-creature spells being slung around left and right. I don't think this is a bomb by any stretch of the imagination, or even that amazing of a card, because I don't think you're going to get too much extra damage off that ability, but I think you will get some. You know, you can probably count on 2 to 4 damage, and if you're lucky, 6. So I think it's a decent enough card that I'll give a B-. Ultimately, in Limited, feels like an uncommon to me, but totally a rare for Constructed, of course. Next up, we have Seismic Elemental. This is a 3 red creature elemental at uncommon for a 4/4 that says when Seismic Elemental enters the battlefield, creatures without flying can't block this turn. So this is an effect we've seen a lot of the times on just spells, and they're usually pretty cheap, like 1 and a red. Again, this seems like a card that wants to be in an aggressive deck. you know, where I get to attack with my team and they can't block because all their guys are on the ground. But it's a 5-drop, which aggressive decks don't really want. So that hurts it, and I think it keeps it as a cuttable card if you want to cut it, and not cuttable if you don't. So solid C from me. Next up, we have Skyraker Giant. This is a 2 red creature giant at uncommon. It's a 4/3, and it has reach. So it's Summit Prowler, but better. Summit Prowler was a 2 red 4/3. This is a 2 red 4/3 with reach. So strictly better Summit Prowler. Summit Prowler was always a super solid C. It was that card that if you needed a 4-drop, it was there. And if you didn't need a 4-drop, if you had better stuff, you could cut it. I think this is ever so slightly better because it can smack Thopters out of the air and any other little low flyers that are kicking around. So I'll go with a C+ on it. But it's not splashy, it's not awesome, it's not amazing, it's not a high pick. It's just a card that I think is less cuttable than cuttable. Next up, we have Smash to Smithereens, a reprint we recently saw in Modern Masters 2, actually. 1 and a red for an instant at common that says, destroy target artifact. Smash to Smithereens deals 3 damage to that artifact's controller. Again, just like Demolish, this seems only playable against the dedicated artifact deck, and even there, I'd rather have a threat. The 3 damage is nice, though. Arguably, that could be threaty enough, so I'll pump this up to a D+, but you're not main decking this, and you're not taking it very highly. You're taking it when there's just nothing else left in the pack. Next up, we have Subterranean Scout. This is a 1 and a red creature Goblin Scout at common for a 2/1, and it says, when Subterranean Scout enters the battlefield, target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked. The interesting thing about this is it's a really solid Renown enabler. Most Renown creatures would be affected by this guy and be able to get in for free and become Renowned. That's really cool. It's a shame that it's not repeatable. You know, it can only be done the one time, but it's a cool interaction nonetheless. Ultimately, this is still just a middling card at kind of C. Cuttable if you want it, if you want to cut it, and not cuttable if you don't. If you have a lot of Renown guys, I can see this getting a little bit better, but solid C for me. Next up, we have Thopter Engineer. Thopter Engineer is a 2 and a red creature human artificer at uncommon, and she's a 1/3. When Thopter Engineer enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying onto the battlefield. Artifact creatures you control have haste. So she seems pretty nifty, but I think only really good in the artifact deck. Getting a 2/4 for 3 is just kind of okay. That's like Colossedon Yearling, and it's not quite as good a blocker as Colossedon Yearling because it's a 1/3 as far as blocking goes, even though it may be a 2/4 while attacking. Yeah, I think you want this in the artifact deck. I think you want this in the deck where you're playing the bonded constructs or whatever they are, and you're playing the Goldforged Sentinels and the other artifact creatures and things like that, or just playing, you know, a ton of Thopters. So by herself, I don't think she's that great. In that one deck, I think she's pretty decent. So, I mean, ultimately, I'm going to have to give this a C as far as the average deck goes, as far as most decks go. But she can be better in the artifact deck, of course. Next up, we have Titan Strength. This is a single red instant at common, and it says target creature gets +3/+1 until end of turn, scry 1. This was from Theros, and it was always totally fine. Just super useful in almost every red deck. It'll almost ensure you that you're at least going to trade, if not profitably block, and getting a scry on top of that, all for 1 red mana, is awesome. It's a combat trick, so it's still, you know, at best a C+, but totally includable in most red decks. Even a second one I wouldn't be too upset about. Finally, we have Volcanic Rambler. This is a 5 and a red creature elemental at common. It's a 6/4, and it says 2 and a red Volcanic Rambler deals 1 damage to target player. I really don't like it. It's way too expensive. It's a 6-drop for a 6/4. That dies to a lot of things. Yeah, it has a 3 mana ping ability, but that's still 3 mana. You know, I guess if you cast this, you can at least ping your opponent for 2 every turn after, but that means you're not establishing your board, and this guy's not going to block all that well. He'll trade well, but he may not block that well. I just don't really want to play a 6-drop that's not incredible. And this is not incredible. It's not even decent, I would say. I think it's just kind of okay. So ultimately, I'm going to be pretty harsh on this guy, and I'm going to go with a D. And I wrestled with giving it an F, but I'll stick with a D for now. So that's red. Red looks really, really good. You may have noticed, I think I gave 1 F. So that's one card that I think is stone unplayable. There's a number of Ds, you know, artifact removal spells, but an awful lot of just mid Cs, C pluses, a fair amount of Bs and As, a lot of really good red burn. I think red's going to be a really dominant color in Magic Origins. I think it's going to be a solid main color. Obviously goes really well with blue to get artifacts going on, but I think it'll probably pair up well with any other color as the support. So I'm pretty excited to play red. I may potentially try to go red at the pre-release, actually. But we'll see. We'll see what green looks like and see what the whole format looks like in the end. But that's red. Hopefully you guys enjoy these videos. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/TheManaLeek. You've already found me here on YouTube. You've got the comment section down below. Definitely let me know what you think of the ratings. If you disagree, if you agree, definitely, you know, start the conversation up. Start the conversation up with other people. You know, definitely utilize those comments. As well, if you like the videos, you should click those little thumbs up icons. Let me know that you like the videos. Let the world know that you like the videos, and keep my videos rising up through the ranks. Finally, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, you should. Subscribing is as easy as clicking the button below each video or the one in the outro of each video, and that'll keep you up to date on all the latest Crack-A-Pack Tuesdays, Wacky Wednesdays, Spiky Saturdays, Magic set reviews, box openings, and any other random videos that pop up here or there. But as always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time.